Please note, this episode was recorded in early September, before Hurricane Helene devastated western North Carolina. That's why the storm isn't mentioned in our discussion. Our thoughts are with those affected, and the city has been actively sending personnel and resources to assist in recovery efforts.
So it's not just a partisan issue. People have seen changes in their backyards, changes to their families, and we've moved away from talking about greenhouse gases, but more, again, about telling stories. We've been in a lot of storytelling workshops as scientists.
A child, a teacher, anybody in the community can see themselves in the plan and take action in a way that makes sense for them. And so that's what I really want folks to see. And there's lots of things we've done to set a foundation for folks to take action.
Hey, Big Ideas Raleigh listeners. I'm Dan Bagley, your friendly neighborhood enthusiast and proud City of Raleigh employee. I'm thrilled to be here, especially today, because our episode focuses on a topic that I think is really important to a lot of people, but they might not understand 100%, and that's sustainability. And we're recording from the historic Chavis Park, which has been an integral part of Raleigh's history and now plays a key role in the future of community here in Raleigh. And I think it's a pretty sustainable building, too, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, you're right.
Joining me on this journey is the great producer, Dr. Sarah Glova. How are we doing today, Sarah?
I'm so great. You know how there are like local celebrities that you really look up to, you follow their work? We're sitting with two of them right now.
I know.
So I feel I might get their autograph after the show. I don't know.
And speaking of two amazing celebrities, we have the great Dr. Kathie Dello. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm a proud City of Raleigh resident and happy to be here.
She is the North Carolina director of Climatology. That's pretty cool.
I know.
I'm not even 100% sure what that means, but I'm sure we're going to find out.
We will find out.
And next, we have the amazing Megan Anderson, the City of Raleigh's Sustainability Director. Welcome, Megan.
Thank you so much. So excited about today.
Well, I got to tell you, we always start these episodes off with a game. I don't know if you've listened to the show or not, but we play a little game called Two Facts and a False. So I'm going to give you three facts. You guys have to guess which one is the false fact. All right, now, you're going to be teamed together, and you're going to be playing against Sarah.
Ugh.
Yeah.
I feel very outnumbered.
and I tried to make these ones a little bit harder concerning...
Thanks.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Sarah. All right, fact one. The state's energy grid is predominantly powered by renewable energy. 2, sustainability focus on balancing environmental, social, and economic needs. This is often referred to as the triple bottom line. And the third, achieving carbon neutrality in sectors like agriculture and transportation is challenging due to embedded emissions from production and global supply chains.
Oh my gosh. Okay. This
Yeah,
is like a pop quiz. Okay. As I heard these three, I wanted the first one to be true, that our grid is powered by predominantly renewable energy, but I don't know if that's true. The second one, I've heard the triple bottom line.
The triple bottom line.
I've heard that. So I feel I'm going to say that the first one is false, even though I'm a little sad to say it.
Okay.
All right. Tell me.
That is your choice.
What do we think, experts?
Yeah, we were whispering over here. We wish number one was the truth, and we are working on that like gangbusters. But yes, it's not number one right now. Although North Carolina is up there across the country with renewable energy.
You guys are well done. Pat yourselves on the back.
Yes.
North Carolina is a leader in solar energy production. The majority of the state's electricity, though, still comes from non-renewable sources like natural gas, nuclear energy, and significant investments are definitely needed to continue to shift this. But like you said, we're working hard at doing that. Wonderful. Well, thank you guys for playing that game. That was kind of fun. And you guys are really smart. I'm definitely going to be in trouble during this episode. So let's talk a little bit more about what you do. If you could, explain it to me like I was a 6-year-old kid and tell me what you do on a day-to-day. So for instance, what does it mean to be a state climatologist?
Yeah, so I help all 10.5 million North Carolinians understand their climate risk. And climate impacts all of us. We woke up this morning and we looked at the weather forecast and we decided what we'd wear. But we probably knew we weren't walking outside in maybe a swimsuit today because it is fall here in Raleigh. So that's climate. And then it touches everything that we do as well. So we talk to a lot of fathers who are putting down deposits for their daughters' weddings about the best time of year to have that wedding.
Interesting.
We talk with farmers about what they might expect this summer or this coming year. And we talk with planners and folks like Megan about what to expect over the next 25, 50, 100 years. Wow.
So that's like your triple bottom line. Fathers, farmers, and Megan, essentially. Well, speaking of Megan, Megan, can you tell us a little bit about a sustainability director?
Sure. Yeah. So I feel like I'm just really lucky to have this job. It's a dream job in a lot of ways. I get to work with all the different city departments and also anyone in the community, really. So we are really, really proud. We have one of the first climate plans in the country in Raleigh. So please, everybody in Raleigh, pat yourselves on the back because this was a group effort. What's first about it is it focuses not only on greenhouse gas reduction, but just as importantly is equity, environmental justice, community health, and building community resilience to the impacts of climate change. So there's a lot there to explain about what that means. And it really, honestly, there is almost everything in the kitchen sink when it comes to different strategies that the city and the community and stakeholders can take to take climate action.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to talk about some of the wins we've had and the barriers and challenges and opportunities that come along with that. But Raleigh is actually, again, very proud, a leader in climate change work and embedding equity in everything that we do.
That's so exciting. I can be a little bit competitive, so I just want to emphasize this real quick. You're saying that we are one of the first cities, not in the state, but in the country. Just want to underline this point here, to have a plan like this.
Yeah. So, and really because folks are really passionate, and myself included, around those equity issues. And so there's been a lot of wonderful work around the country for a very long time on all these issues. But to really bring a plan together that really embeds all of those things together. So really when we're thinking about high impact, it's not just about those greenhouse gases. We're also designing the strategies. I always say it's the what and the how. So how are we doing the work? We are thinking about those folks in the community that have been disinvested in over time. There's been people in power that have made decisions over time that have created some situations that we have now. And we want to make sure when we are thinking about our climate, and as Kathie mentioned, there's folks that are more vulnerable to some of these things. If you live or work outside, if you're playing, on the playground during lunch break when you're in school, there's a lot of places where you're more vulnerable to climate change, and we need to think about all those folks first when we're designing the strategies, not because we're only focusing on them, but we want to make sure everybody's lifted up together through the strategies and work that we do. And we've had to be really creative, and we definitely pull best practices from all over the country, from wonderful places to get this work done. And we are also competitive, but also really, really collaborative. So it's pretty exciting because we all steal from each other and then say, make it better, and I'll steal it back.
Oh, I wonder how many groups have reached out to you and said, can we get this template? Can we get how you did this?
We actually have entire organizations, just the Southeast Sustainability Directors Network, this U.S. We have U.S. national networks that this is what we do all day, is share resources and then steal them back and forth and make them better, and design them in ways that fit our community.
So you've touched on literally about 10 different things that I want to ask questions about just in that short little description. But before we do that, what I want to do is take an opportunity to see what's a big idea that you're working on currently that the people of Raleigh should know about. And actually, let's start with you, Kathie.
Yeah, so I've been saying extreme everything. And if you think back to earlier this summer in Raleigh, it was really hot. We were going through a drought. We were talking about hurricane season. And there was fire risk too. And reporters call me up and ask me, Kathie, what's going on? And I had to say, which hazard are we talking about?
Oh, wow.
And we, as folks who are living in the city, sometimes don't think about things like drought, but that impacts our food supply. And North Carolina lost a big portion of its corn crop this year. But when we're in the city, we think about things like urban heat because we can feel it. So we're in places like Chavis Park, which are a little bit cooler, but maybe you're walking down Fayetteville Street and it's a little bit hotter. So folks are experiencing that, and they call us up and they say, is this normal? is this what we've always experienced? Carolina summers are hot. Is this just what we should be expecting? And will this continue and get worse?
So you just said urban heat. And so for the listeners at home, what creates this urban heat?
Yeah, so we have a lot of pavement and things that absorb the heat and then re-emit it. So if you're wearing a black t-shirt on a hot day, that's a bad idea. And essentially we put black t-shirts all over our city. And when we put those white t-shirts on in green cooler areas, we can cool down those black t-shirts. But
so it's a lot of that cement and those impervious, I believe is the impervious areas. Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, our roads, our homes, the places we need to live in.
That's
and I know we had a previous episode where we talked was it Zach, who was with Urban Forestry?
That's right.
And he was talking about the tree canopy and how sometimes it's adding the shade. So anywhere there's that black t-shirt, if we can't switch it to a different color t-shirt, I love this metaphor.
It is.
Can we add some trees or some kind of shade to help improve
to
that?
mitigate that? Yeah. So one other thing you said that I think is really important and extreme everything. And I love that because I remember, 10, 20 years ago, we were talking about it's coming. If we don't do something now, it's now. And these catastrophes are happening and we're in the middle of it. And am I correct in that assumption?
Yeah, it's here, it's now, and it's in our backyards. And we're seeing the impacts across the city of Raleigh and also North Carolina.
Yeah, I would imagine the United States as a whole as well.
Yeah, and the planet.
And the planet. You're right. Let's just take it really big. You're right. Well, Megan, what about you? What's something really big you're working on?
Actually, I'd love to. There's so many really amazing projects happening, like I mentioned, because of the kitchen sink of everything that's in the climate plan. But I will say some of the work that we feel like is just really exciting because it leads with the community actually includes Kathie. So we're actually working with the federal government, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And we were actually, Raleigh, again, pat ourselves on the back. We were the first city they've ever awarded a grant in the 18 years of their program. They worked a lot with communities across the country, but working with a big government and a big government is a lot. So it was pretty crazy to put together. But what we're working on is resiliency in the community. And so there's 3 activities in this grant and lots of partnerships across the community. The first activity is we're really working very closely with our local grassroots organization, Partners for Environmental Justice. Amazing organization, really deep roots in the community. We've had a long partnership with them on setting up a lot of really good community-based programs to talk about climate change. So with that program, we actually created a train the trainer model, and we empower the local community members to really learn about climate impacts, what is impacting them in their neighborhoods. In particular, we focus on the communities that are most impacted. So PEJ, Partners for Environmental Justice, they are traditionally in the Walnut Creek watershed area, which is historically a Black community that is in a low-lying area, and there's a lot more flooding issues that they have been impacted by for a very long time. And we've expanded that through this grant across the entire community, and we're really focusing in on those neighborhoods that are experiencing climate change more because we have, which we could nerd out a lot more about, which Kathie was also involved in. We have all this great urban heat data. We have all this great data around flooding. Those are our two of our biggest climate impacts we see the most often, although Kathie could tell you a million other things like she just mentioned that are happening as our weather is getting more extreme. But what we've done is we have these really strong stormwater-related flooding networks that we've created with Train the Trainers over time, and we've expanded that to heat as well. So we just kicked those off this year, and actually it was amazing. We had more people even show up that day than we even had sign up for the first one.
Oh my gosh.
It was the most diverse group ever. We had such a good time. It always feels like a family, even the first time we meet, we have a really good time. These folks in the community are coming every Saturday to hang out with us. I mean, it's amazing. We actually pay them for their time to go through this curriculum with us. And then they are ambassadors in the community about these, and they learn about very complicated things in some ways, right? Like, what does it actually mean to do infrastructure in the city in these ways?
That's amazing.
How do they empower their other neighbors to know what it is to kind of navigate that? The legal issues we have. I always say North Carolina is a little bit of a mother may I state. So we can't really make things happen unless we've been given the authority. So It's really good for folks to kind of understand that, so they know when they ask for something like, who they can even ask.
Yeah.
And we learn so much from them. I think that's my favorite part, is really just talking to folks in the community about what they're seeing. And so that's just one activity. And just quickly, I'll say there's a second activity. We have a Ready Raleigh Emergency Preparedness Guide. And what I love about that is we're partnering with departments across the community as well, including Dan's department, Housing and Neighborhoods, and also Fire and a lot of others. Emergency preparedness is so important, but what I really love about this guide is it creates community, and really that social cohesion is what saves people when, if you think about big disasters that even happened, the communities that are already socially connected are the ones that do so much better.
Right.
You know which neighbor has medicine that they need to refrigerate, and maybe you can help them out. You know which neighbor has a lot of kids maybe, and they need help getting out of their house. You know what you can do for your neighbors. They know what they can do for you. They do so much better. So we are able to have those conversations and create everyday resilience that then leads to resilience during those storms. And then lastly, Kathie and team, us getting together as science nerds here, we're thinking about, so resilience is all about also infrastructure and how over time do we do better, right? And make people more resilient. And so what does that look like? And so we're going to partner with her and talk to the community about what does that look like in Raleigh in the future. And there's some exciting things happening, with our comprehensive plan, which is the city's long-term plans for the city that kind of guides all the work and how we're kind of looking at it from the bigger lens. But then what does that actually look like as we make day-to-day decisions? And we're going to embed heat and flooding and resilience into that process, and with Kathie's help.
And just to call out, there's 2 plans that have been mentioned. There's that comprehensive plan, which I know we've talked about in past episodes, because that's something that kind of touches
Community
a lot of
Climate
departments.
Action Plan, I believe.
And then that's the other plan that we talked about, the community. Say it again. You just
Community Climate Action Plan.
There we go.
Right.
So
Got it.
2 different plans, but definitely a lot of things in between those that work together.
And where can you find these? Because you've talked about now the Ready Raleigh, is that the
Ready
name?
Raleigh Emergency Preparedness. Yeah.
Where do you find those? Where do you find these plans?
If you actually, and I just Google all these things. If you put City of Raleigh Emergency Preparedness, Ready Raleigh, or if you put in City of Raleigh Climate Action, if you put in City of Raleigh Comprehensive Plan, all these things will come up.
That's perfect. So just search for them. You know, it's so interesting. One of the things I love whenever I get to hear you talk, Megan, is I always learn about programs that are going on that I had no idea. You mentioned the resilience piece and how communities that have those connections with their neighbors, those are the ones that do well if there is some kind of emergency, having those connections. I remember reading that study when it came out that looked at which communities are able to get through something like that. And it's the ones, they know their neighbors, they know who to talk to. And so there's a lot we can learn there, and we can maybe put a link to that study in the show notes.
That's a great idea. And I have to say, I was actually one of the first people to work on the Ready Raleigh plan document.
Dan's team has been,
was there.
celebrity.
I was part of it.
The Housing and Neighborhoods Department has been, for a long time, really deep history in the community, and really there's such good information in that guide, but I just get so excited about the community impact you can have to have conversations about how you help each other every day, and when something comes up like an emergency.
We said it was a celebrity episode, and
It
you're one
is.
of the celebrities.
I'm one of the 3 too, and we already know you're a celebrity, so that's 4 for 4. Kathie, we've been talking a lot about the things we got going on, but it sounds like you work with us, the City of Raleigh, a ton in everything you do. So my question is, what kind of data do you look at to help cities like Raleigh plan for climate change, and how does that data affect decisions being made?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we do this a number of ways, and it looks different with every community. Communities aren't monoliths. We can't just walk into Raleigh and say this worked in Charlotte, so this is what we're going to do here. One of the things that we've done with Raleigh in 2021, we mapped our urban heat islands. So we sent 150 volunteers out with some donuts and sensors on their cars at 6 a.m. from here at Chavis Park. And they got us all sorts of temperature data. So we've been using those data for the past few years with Megan and her team. But we also work with them in collecting other types of data and using projected climate data. So taking the climate models and better understanding what might be in store for them.
So people were driving in cars, and they had
biking
some
and
type
walking.
of temperature. Good point. biking and walking as well.
Yeah, with monitors.
Well, I mean, what does this monitor look like? How does that work?
It's truly so simple. It's a PVC pipe with a little contraption in it, and you put it out your window, and you had a little receiver in your car, and you drove a mapped route.
Okay.
And folks went out at 6 a.m., 3 p.m., and 7 p.m. or 6 p.m. later that evening. It's been a few years now. And we saw how the heat was retained in certain areas and how other areas cooled down more quickly. And it tended to be the lower income areas that stayed hotter all day.
Fascinating.
There's that equity piece that Megan was talking about earlier, where a lot of times when I think folks hear that, there is that question of, well, why are we giving special attention to these areas? And it's not special attention, it's necessary attention, because these are areas that are often more affected. And we could talk about the, historic decisions that were made that caused that effect. But then looking at going forward, there does need to be that focused attention on some of those areas. And now it sounds like we have the data to back that up.
We have the data, but I want to say that communities know their climate problems. You don't need a PhD in climate science to know that it floods frequently, or that it's flooding more, or that it's hot. So by letting communities own the data, they're able to talk to decision makers and policymakers and advocate for themselves.
That's great. Before we jump away from, I just want to touch base again about the Community Climate Action Plan, because this thing's like a 70-page document. I remember just kind of flipping through it, and I consider myself, pretty climate conscious. But what should people take away from that book, Megan?
Yeah, thank you so much for asking that question, because I actually don't tell people to go read the plan. I might say, hey, flip through and check out certain areas if there's something you're really interested in. We actually have climate implementation reports that I would say are great, because they actually are little snapshots of lots of things that the community and city are doing to take climate action, and those give you good ideas. But we actually designed the plan so that anybody could see themselves in it. So we really designed it around high impact, like I said, around greenhouse gas reduction, equity, environmental justice, community health, and resilience. And so we kept the strategy areas broad on purpose. So whether you're a business, a homeowner, a renter, a child, a teacher, anybody in the community can see themselves in the plan and take action in a way that makes sense for them. And so that's what I really want folks to see. And there's lots of things we've done to set a foundation for folks to take action. So like Kathie said, I could go on forever about all the ways that we've now worked with the community, because we can see the data and say, what kind of equity projects can we design all around the city and invest first in the places that are seeing the most impacts in heat and flooding. We also have a sustainable business toolkit so that businesses can also take action in Raleigh. And there's a lot that they do because they have large employment, in the community. They serve a lot of people. They're very visible, so they can have a high impact too. And there's a lot of things and resources that the city and our partners at the state and the county and lots of other places have that we've pulled together in one place for people to look and say, what makes sense for me? What do I need? Lots of different places. And so the city is a small part of the overall impact. When we look at our greenhouse gases, we're less than 2% of the total impact. So we really need a lot of folks to be taking action. And again, we really do. So I do want to give another shout out to the community. Like when we did that urban heat mapping, which actually was a partnership again to get the equipment from NOAA back in the day, we were the largest in the country they'd ever seen, because Raleigh residents showed up at 6 a.m. 3 times for that day. They biked, they walked, they drove. They were excited about this, and they were excited about the data. And so they showed up. We broke records there too. We have a lot of programs actually that I could mention where we've broken national records because we've all come together and we've really been able to have an impact because we're all doing things together. And it saves money, it saves times, it saves costs. There's lots of ways that it benefits and makes it just better for us to be able to do these
competitive
things.
Spirit is like very excited with how well you're saying that Raleigh's doing. I want to call out one thing. When you were talking about the plan and then you listed some other toolkits, it sounds like these resources, to kind of your question, Dan, are things that are meant to be kind of used as tools that we search through to find the information. So I'm thinking it's almost like an encyclopedia. You're not going to go and open any of these and start at page 1 and go all the way through to page 70. You're really flipping through, trying to find the information that's maybe relevant to you. And then you keep talking about community. I love this so much. You started us off today talking about how with your role, you get to work with all the departments. So right away you were setting up that what you do is very collaborative, But then you just continue to mention partnerships, how you're trying to lead with community, working with all these different partners. It's just giving me the sense that if we're talking about sustainability, it's not something that can live in isolation. It really has to be, and you mentioned the city, and when you say the city, you mean kind of the local government is only responsible for 2% of the greenhouse gases here.
Yeah.
That's
and
amazing.
so we need those partnerships if we're going to see differences in those numbers.
Well, we need to take a quick break, but when we come back, I want to ask a little bit more about those grants you were talking about. You're listening to the Big Ideas Raleigh podcast. Please note, this episode was recorded in early September, before Hurricane Helene devastated western North Carolina. That's why the storm isn't mentioned in our discussion. Our thoughts are with those affected, and the city has been actively sending personnel and resources to assist in recovery efforts. Welcome back to the Big Ideas Raleigh podcast. I am with Dr. Kathie Dello and Megan Anderson, one of the state, one of the city. Sounds like we just have partnerships going on. And before we left break, I said I wanted to talk a little bit more about these grants that might be hidden in some of these toolkits. And I believe one of them is called the Neighborhood Climate Action Fund. Megan, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we were actually able to partner with our friends over in Housing and Neighborhoods who do a ton of really good community work on the ground. Dan knows something about that. And we basically look for opportunities to embed in existing grants climate action. So folks know, hey, there are a lot of ways that we can come together as a community, and we want to ask for some money from the city to do something new that's going to build community. And we've given lots of ideas about what that might look like from a climate plan. So is it anything from community gardening to, packing your own emergency preparedness kit to actually people dream up better ideas than I ever could, right? To go there. And so we partnered with them in order to make that possible. And so folks can go on the website and look and apply for those money. I love to call things pilots too, because this work is actually really hard. There's a lot of barriers that we come to. And so when you're actually able to get a little funding to start something out, what we want to do is replicate that and say, how did it go? What worked? What didn't? Let's do it again. And then let's find more money and do it again, because we've proved that this is something successful and it's making an impact. So I love anything that we can pilot, and that really helps us do that.
Yeah, and it's just it's grassroots level. Anyone, anywhere within the city can apply for these and do something cool in their own backyard, in their own neighborhood. That's
worth almost like double clicking on, because I think I've had a chance to live a lot of places, and we've talked about this. I just don't know if there are many communities that have so many different ways that, is it a small business? Is it a neighborhood? Can look on a Raleigh website and say, okay, here's a way we can apply for some funding for a pilot project that we want to do, so that we know more of our neighbors have emergency preparedness kits, or so that we are thinking about some of the green infrastructure, to use that term that we learned in a previous episode, to help improve the flooding, in the parking lot of my small business or in this part of my neighborhood. It's just really interesting that there's this grassroots level ability if you live here.
Yeah, 100%. So
and we have it because people show up and they want to do it. So that's the thing, again, too, that people really care about this stuff in the community.
Well, I would like to move on to Kathie here for a moment, and I'd love to understand a little bit more about your perspective of looking at things on a state level. How do these types of community projects fit into the bigger sustainability picture?
Yeah, so I will say that most scientists don't go into science to work with a ton of people. It's not normally the path that we take.
Right, okay.
But it's the path we have to take with climate, because we have to have those partnerships outside of science too, because the data isn't enough on its own. We've been talking about the data for decades, but it's always climate plus something else. It's climate plus the community. It's climate plus kids. It's climate plus jobs. So like I said, communities aren't monoliths, and we work with a lot of really different ones. We work with small rural communities that are aging and are worried about living with the water that's coming in from the ocean. And retreat isn't an option for everybody. We talk about it as if folks should just move away from their multi-generational homes and come to Raleigh, where we're also booming and growing and may not have space. We work with communities up in the mountains that are experiencing flooding and an increasing fire risk.
And you don't think of floods in a mountain.
Right? It's across the entire state, there's a flood risk, from the ocean taking up space and coming onto land to really extreme rainfall and these egg carton-like mountains that we have, which are beautiful and we love visiting, but when the rain falls on them, they just flood down to the valleys.
Oh my gosh, the egg carton metaphor.
I can just
picture
down.
with the water going. That's exactly what, anytime I'm lucky enough to travel in that part of the state, but if there's a big storm, you see that.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds to me like, to your point, you have scientists, and these scientists might not be the best, people at times, but you find the partners to join with, which I love, because so now what it sounds like to me, it's storytelling. So it's storytelling science through these partnerships, and that to me is just a beautiful idea and a beautiful relationship.
Yeah, and people want solutions.
Right.
So a lot of us science people are the problem people. I can tell you what's going wrong and how it will continue to go wrong. But folks like Megan...
The science people are often the problem people. I don't want to skip on that because I think that's really helpful. And I think a lot of folks who want to learn more about this world, some of the frustration I hear is there's just so much to learn. Mm-hmm. And that's true if your goal is necessarily understanding the problem, because the science people are the problem people. And so there's the explaining what's going on. But with the stories and the solutions, that's where maybe people can start to understand how they can be part of a solution.
Absolutely. I used to give talks and I would go in and say, here's everything that's going wrong, and then leave. And people would be really unsatisfied. And I get it. Like, what do I do about it?
I'm already seeing the emails coming in right now. We aren't the problem.
I love, though, that it sounds like you had a shift and something. Mm-hmm. I get a chance to work with a lot of amazing students, often at NC State, and we talk about presentations. And it's the idea that we need more stories. And to help students get more comfortable with stories, I tell them that stories are just data with a soul. So it's not that you're leaving the data behind. Right. You're just trying to add that piece that makes people feel like they're seeing the humanity in it or they're seeing themselves in it. Mm-hmm. And so what was that switch like? What kind of presentations do you give now?
Well, we talk much more about solutions, but people don't necessarily want the science presentations anymore. The climate 101s have gone away. Mm. And there's this general acceptance that climate change is happening and it's affecting North Carolinians. 70% of North Carolinians say that climate change is happening. 70% of North Carolinians don't think the same about a lot of things.
That's a great point.
So it's not just a partisan issue. People have seen changes in their backyards, changes to their families, and we've moved away from talking about greenhouse gases, but more, again, about telling stories. We've been in a lot of storytelling workshops as scientists, and I just want to give a shout out to the Wolf Pack. So thank you for working with our wonderful students.
It's genuinely my pleasure. And I think that a lot of the students that I work with are interested in going into this field. And the shift that I've seen in the more than 10 years that I've been lucky to work with students is that the interest is coming from all different departments. It's no longer like I need to go into this one very specific field to get into the sustainability world. There are students from all different departments who are getting interested in this, and a lot of them are learning about how to communicate with the partners that they need to form partnerships with, the people who are maybe interested in this. And so I'm so glad to hear you kind of highlighting the importance of that.
Yeah, all jobs are now climate jobs. So you don't need to take the linear path that I did in atmospheric science to work in climate anymore.
Mm-hmm. And I just want to reiterate what Kathie was saying, how important it is to have all these different voices at the table. So we really, really, really rely on folks like Kathie and the folks that are doing this work and are paying attention. We are wanting to spend our time in the community taking that really important information to show what's happening, translating it into storytelling, translating it into something that people care about. So we're the practitioners on the ground saying, what are we going to do about it? What are we going to do about it? What works for Raleigh? What's happening? Who's most impacted? How do we get in touch with them? How does this affect their daily lives? Because again, like Kathie's saying, it's not about just the science. It's about what are they seeing when they walk out their door for the day? What are they seeing in their homes that we can make better so their quality of life is higher? And so it's really telling those stories about folks where we've been able to figure those things out. But we really need that data and science. And I often say to folks too, when we get this great data and science, okay, how can you translate this into like English, like layman's English, that we can easily then say like, yeah, give us the punchline of this so we can take it and then really use it to tell our stories, but then be able to go back and say, hey, Kathie, like now what are we going to do? Like our work, which is kind of exciting and also crazy because you have to find times to celebrate, milestones because it never ends. It's not like, oh, good, we fixed climate change. We fixed racial equity issues. They never stop. We phase them into a new system where we're digging in deeper. And things change over time too, right? Just like extreme heat, but our community is growing. It's one of the fastest in the country that's rising in population. And so with that, we have so many opportunities, but we also have, we need to make sure we're focused on not leaving people behind because things are moving so fast. So really we rely on all these different types of partners to come together to bring their expertise to the table.
So let's touch on that. I mean, you brought up a great point. How does equity play a role in Raleigh's climate action and sustainability initiatives?
Yeah, so really when we think about equity, we think about, like I mentioned before, who is most impacted, and then who have we honestly even, who's been disinvested in, who has not always been at the table. And we often think, when we think about our history, there's been people in power, government and many others that have made decisions and that just left out sectors of the community. And often that's folks that may be living, working outside more often, folks living in low-lying areas. Often it's across the country, communities of color that are most impacted by these issues, and it impacts all different parts of their lives. It's really hard to unpack sometimes how that health and other quality of life, access to resources, how do you undo some of the things? So when we think about that, we think about lifting up everybody together. So when we design solutions and strategies on the how we're going to do something, we try to think. So a quick example is with transportation electrification. So that's a really high impact strategy for us. We want to get people out of their cars and driving less, and we have a lot of strategies for that. But in reality, people are going to drive, right? So let's make those cars as clean as possible. It would be very easy, and you hear sometimes folks say like, oh, well, everybody can't afford an EV, so why are we even worrying about charging in certain areas of town? Well, that's exactly how things start to be inequitable because the cost, especially in Raleigh, because so many folks are getting them, the costs are coming down quickly. We are building infrastructure in buildings that last 50 years or longer. If we do not put the infrastructure in the beginning for multifamily housing, we have almost 50% renters in Raleigh and other places from the beginning, they are going to be left out. They won't have anywhere to charge that vehicle. And so we are focused on making sure that the folks that maybe aren't at the table see themselves in an EV in the future, and we make sure that the infrastructure gets in their neighborhoods too, so they're part of the clean energy transition because they deserve to have clean energy that's healthier in their community just as much as everybody.
This is a part of that storytelling that you were talking about. I mean, this is an example of the translating something and using story to help people understand. So when we talk about decisions that people in power might make that cause some areas of the city to not have what other areas of the cities have and how that can impact from a sustainability perspective, you just gave us an example. Normally the examples we hear are examples from, 50, 100 years ago of where we chose to put highways or factories. But you're giving us one that is relevant today.
Now.
So the idea that when we look at a map of Raleigh, someone in a position of power might say, well, let's put the charging stations where there are the highest number of people who have bought.
People raising their hands right now.
People who have those vehicles right now. But then if you look at the data, who has those electric vehicles right now? The people who can afford them. So you're going to make a decision to only put those charging stations in these areas that are likely higher income or higher socioeconomic status. And what you're saying that is being done really intentionally is, no, wait, we need to be careful doing that because if we only put stations where people currently have those vehicles, then someone might make a decision down the road not to buy one of those vehicles because they don't have any charging stations in their area because of the choices that were made. So there's a great storytelling example of how we're trying to change what we've done in the past and do better in the future.
Well, and it makes me start thinking, so we're talking about the city right now, and we already know that, we lack a lot of charging stations, to use the same example. But now I start thinking about on the state level and, local sustainability projects. How do we help create long-term resilience against climate change at a regional level or even that state level? I mean, how do we do it broader?
Yeah, this is a really good question. And this is a space I've worked in now for a number of years in 3 states. And North Carolina is a really progressive place to think about this because of those partnerships we have, but also we see the impacts here and now. We won't dispute that the oceans are rising and that we're seeing coastal flooding. We won't dispute that our phones go off almost every time it rains now in downtown Raleigh with a flash flood warning. So folks are thinking about, how do we take this place that we love and how do we thrive in a changing climate? And one of the things that we like to say is that step away from climate resilience, because that feels like one more thing you need to do.
Okay.
The things you need to do to be resilient for climate help you with other stuff. So broadband access, eliminating food deserts, more walkability, more green space and park access. Those are all climate resilience, and those all make for a better North Carolina.
That's a great point. Broadband. I wasn't even thinking broadband.
But hey, that gets that partnerships piece that we talked about. And what Megan started us off with, the idea that being in this role of sustainability means working with all the departments.
Right.
And so for Kathie's point, it's really uplifting things that people want in North Carolina, but highlighting how that supports this climate resilience that we know is important, we know is affecting. It's
You
really
can't get that Ready Raleigh guide if you're on dial-up.
It's a great point.
Just like you need access to transportation, it's just as important to have access to information to even know where that transportation is.
Wow.
That's great. Well, we will be right back with the Big Ideas Raleigh podcast. Welcome back to the Big Ideas Raleigh podcast. Okay, we're running out of time, so we're going to hit one last big question. And we want to know, is there something that you would like to highlight that we haven't talked about today, but you think it's really important to get out there?
Kathie, I can't wait to hear what you're going to say.
So I'm going first, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. You're thrown under the bus. Let's go.
Well, I'm going to talk about a bus, actually, because
We did not plan that.
we did not plan this at all. I want to emphasize that there's still hope, and that this problem isn't unsolvable, and that we aren't on a runaway train or a runaway bus. But we have fallen asleep on the bus, and it's still moving. And we're not going to wait to the last stop to get off. We have to get off sooner. And with the partnerships that we have with the city and other folks like Partners for Environmental Justice and the team that we have working on this, I know we can find that bus stop sooner. But for the young people who are in this room and maybe listening to this, there's a better world that's there, and we can grasp it, and it's within reach. And I wouldn't be waking up and doing this job every single day if I didn't think that was possible.
That's
Thank you for
awesome.
that, because we do hear so much negative news related to this topic, and a lot of it's really important, but I think it can maybe make folks feel like there isn't that hope. And I know especially for the young people that we want to see entering into this field and bringing their awesome thought leadership to these problems, really emphasizing, no, there is hope. There's great people working on this. Come join.
Yeah. We love this state. We love this city. We want to see the people survive, but also thrive.
That's wonderful. Megan.
Wow. I have to go after that.
I know.
That was like, we should just kind of drop the mic after that.
Well,
with
and
Kathie.
here we go. We have the scientist telling us the story. Way to go.
I know, right? How inspirational did you ever think, Kathie?
I just really liked weather.
Well, just kind of building on what Kathie was saying, I think you don't have to lead with climate change. And I think for us, there's so many things. If you care about your community, and you care about your family, and you care about your quality of life, which we all do, there's just so many things you can do that benefit you and benefit your neighbors and everybody in Raleigh as well. And so it's okay if you don't lead with climate change, and it's okay for us as well to really be able to tell stories around what people are doing that are making big impacts. We do like to bring it back to climate change because, again, with the science, we need to show that we are making an impact.
Right.
And I feel like it's important for me to be a cheerleader and just really brag about the amazing amount of work that people are doing and how excited they are about it. And Kathie mentioned even young people as well. They are really the future of this. And so, I'm amazed every day. I talk to a lot of young people. We actually have a program, I'll just say a community climate internship program that is very, very successful. We had 19 climate interns throughout all the different city departments working on cool this stuff did not exist when I was in school, and I'm not that old, people. But like to be able to get into a government and in college, we even have programs for high schoolers. Actually, I will say as well, one of the high schoolers was so inspired. She made this amazing video that we showed at their big celebration. We had hundreds of people and their families there to celebrate the interns' work with the city staff. And me and the city manager were crying because it was happy tears. It was such an amazing video. So we brought it to the city council. Half of them were crying too by the time we showed it.
We're going to have to include that in the show notes.
Oh,
Yeah,
please
that's gonna
do.
go in the show notes,
Yeah,
for sure.
It's just such a good video, but it just shows. And it was about the friendship she'd made on the team and how inspired she was by Dr. Norman Camp and other leaders in the community that have left us this legacy over time. And so, this is just, it's our future, like Kathie was saying too, and youth are our future as well. And so we need to listen to them because this is their future that we're impacting right now as well. But again, it's about our quality of life, and it's about making this a great place for everybody. And there's just so much we can do. And so it might be a community climate action plan, but the stuff in there is just really making us happy, making us better every day together. And that's what
things
matters.
that impact our, as you said, quality of life. And I just want to call out how many times you've bragged on the community members in Raleigh.
Right.
And so for any community member who, whether it was helping with that urban heat island project or showing up to one of the community conversations, or if you were one of the interns, just any community member who has been interested in this, helped to amplify the work, maybe volunteered, just a thank you. I mean, it's one of the reasons that we have these robust programs because there's this interest in the community. And as somebody who doesn't work for the city, I've seen through these podcast episodes that there are these ways to get involved. But this is maybe one of the loudest call to actions that I've heard, because it's not just, come and learn information. It's, hey, if you have an idea in your neighborhood, in your small business, we might have information, resources, or funding to help you. And so a big thank you to the Raleigh community for supporting this. And I'm excited, hopefully, to see more folks involved in this.
Yeah, I just want to back up that thank you for sure.
And I want to also thank you for mentioning Dr. Norman Camp.
Yes.
He was an amazing individual. I was very lucky to actually call him a friend. And I would spend every week with him at a McDonald's, and we would sit down and we would talk about everything that's going on in the city, everything that's going on in Southeast Raleigh. And we both actually have special needs kids. And so we also had that language that we could speak. And it's to Kathie's point about there's still hope. He was just an individual who created amazing programs in Southeast Raleigh that the city followed and joined him in his call to action. And look where we are now.
Wow.
So
What
I
a
think
great mentor.
he
That's
was amazing.
Yeah.
But to that point, you two are also amazing mentors. And I see so many people who have followed your leadership, and I commend you both. And Raleigh and the state is a much better place because of you two.
Absolutely. We meant it when we said celebrities, and I'll include all three of the folks sitting to the side of me here as celebrities.
All the partnerships we've had with Dan's team.
But genuinely, so many people look up to the work that you're doing and are excited to find ways to get involved. I don't know how you go to the grocery store around here without being recognized and just pulled to the side of, I have a question about this program, or how can I do this? So thank you, all three of you, for the work that you do and for being so accessible to those of us who have questions, comments, ideas.
Well, thanks for telling the great stories, too. You brought things home. The double click, all the things that you mentioned were great ways to kind of reemphasize some of the things that we're trying to make happen.
Yeah, thank you.
And I love this city. So thanks for all the work you all do to make it a great place to live.
And thank you to our listeners. Give us a follow. Find the Big Ideas Raleigh podcast on any podcast app or on YouTube. We've got more great episodes coming your way as we dive deep into the heartbeat of our Oak City. And hey, if you have ideas for a podcast, let us know. Visit our podcast page to share your ideas with us. We'd love to hear from you. A special shout out to the production team behind this podcast, Earfluence, a Raleigh-based podcast production company. Learn more at earfluence.com. This podcast was brought to you by the City of Raleigh's Office of Strategy and Innovation, also known as the Office of Yes and the City of Raleigh's Communication Department. I'm Dan Bagley, and we'll see you next time on the Big Ideas Raleigh podcast. And remember, there's still hope.